Good morning. We would love to welcome you to this morning's webinar. Daxko has a great opportunity to create a forum for thought leadership, and we're bringing you all together to establish open communication and share tips and best practices this morning. We're really excited to say that we have more than 100 YMCAs that have registered for this event with more than 132 attendees. And we also have some community and health and wellness centers as well as some JCCs on the phone too. So we're really excited to be able to share these best practices with you. You may have even seen us capturing some of this information on our industry blog on Daxko.com, but we also want to give you the opportunity to be able to hear from some of your fellow peers and highlight some of the great work that they're doing out there in the field and about creating a culture of engagement. So today we'll be hosting our second webinar in this series titled Tips for Keeping Your Staff Engaged. And before introducing our moderator, I do want to go over just a few housekeeping tips. My name is Brooklyn White, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager at Daxko. We will be recording this webinar, and so we are keeping all lines muted for quality. And you're welcome to submit any questions you have via the chat function, and we'll be saving some time at the end of the webinar to go over as many questions as we can answer. So now I do want to introduce you to our moderator, Kristin Breaker. Kristin grew up as a Y kid. Her life was shaped by nonprofit staff that had a passion to change lives. And because of this, Kristin is dedicated to developing and supporting people who work in the nonprofit world. After an impressive 13 years working with Ys with 4 individual associations and 9 years at YUSA, Kristin joined the Daxko team as our engagement and adoption consultant, and we are very thrilled to have her. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kristin. Kristin?
Hi, Brooklyn. Thank you so much. I am absolutely loving being at Daxko because I have the chance to travel around to YMCAs and talk about one of my absolute most favorite topics, which is member engagement. I spent many years as a membership director and was part-time working at the front desk. So Daxko Engage and engaging members is absolutely one of the things I am so passionate about. One of my recent travels, I noticed a Y that had been doing some things just fantastically well, and I soon became very good friends with the person at that YMCA who kind of is the guru of Engage, Mr. Ken Hoyt. And what I love about Ken is that Ken is really a camp guy who masquerades in IT, which I think is something really unique for YMCAs. Ken began his journey with the Akron Y at the age of 10 by attending overnight camp and has spent almost 20 years as their technology director. He served on numerous committees, on numerous advisory committees for YUSA, including the Y Tech Committee. He has grown operations from 20 computers to more than 275 under his direction. To this day, Ken still leads music and evening programs at YNOA every Friday evening during the summers, demonstrating his passion for the association he serves. So I want to thank Ken for joining me and welcome him. And I know a lot of YMCAs will really benefit from some of the tips and some of the kind of real talk that Ken's going to enlighten us with on this webinar. But before we begin and dig into some of the Akron YMCA and Ken initiatives that he's done, we would like to take a poll. So the question is your staff engaged? Would you say your staff is engaged? So we'll go ahead and pause and let you guys click yes, no, or sometimes, but we could do better.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Just go ahead and enter your answers, and we'll just give it a few seconds to populate. And it looks like we're doing great. We've got really trending 85% sometimes, but we could do better. But we do have a few that think yes and no. So here are our results.
Holy smokes.
Kristin, I'll turn it back over to you now.
Well, I think this is a place that a lot of YMCAs absolutely have echoed this in my travels. Ken, what would you say if you didn't click, what would you say, how would you have answered this, Ken?
There we go. All right. Sorry
Hey,
about that.
there's that golden voice.
Yeah, so I love that sometimes what we could do better option. I think that's kind of cool because you're always growing, but we've definitely moved that needle a little bit. We've got a lot of staff that are far more engaged than they were a few months back when you and I first got together, Kristen.
Absolutely, which is exactly why you are our panelist today, Ken. So let's just go ahead and dig into the Akron Y and some of the great things that you've been doing. Can you talk about what was the first reason or thought process around deciding to adopt an overall culture of engagement?
Well, I think kind of at the root of it, there, we all know that one of the primary influencers around member and program participant retention is we've talked about that casual to connectedness movement, but connectedness is really that same thing as it being engaged. And so we knew that if we wanted to affect our retention, we really had to change how our members were engaged. And at the core of that, the ultimate responsibility for that engagement falls on our staff. And so they've got to be engaging in that relationship.
So let's, kind of start and dig into the different levels of your association. We know a lot of your actually, let's step back. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about the Akron Y so that people kind of have an idea of the size and scope? I know, we mentioned 270, going from 20 to 270 laptops, which I think can kind of give people an idea of the size, but maybe kind of talk a little bit about the Akron YMCA so people know, kind of have an idea of where you sit.
Sure, we, as many Ys, we're very diverse in our program offerings, but at the core, when we talked about kind of our membership and program branches, we have 6 primary membership branches, which adds up to about 38,000 units, and 80-ish in terms of actual members as we break those out. Our annual budget this year, I think, is around 18.5 million. But we also run other programs. We have 2 summer camps we operate, one camp for kids with special needs. We've got a high school for youth that are not welcome in their normal high school environment, and those sorts of things, as well as plenty of child care and other similar programs.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ken. So let's so understanding you're a multi-branch or multi-center association, and you definitely have, a C-suite level and executive directors and directors. So let's first start talking about establishing a culture of engagement for the leadership level. How has the C level or the kind of core leadership group bought into establishing this culture of engagement?
Well, I think that's definitely a key role in us kind of rolling out this new engagement initiative. Our CEO definitely, in conversations with our board, realized that retention is certainly an important thing, and we've set some strategic goals around retention. And so knowing that how we engage our members and how our staff are involved in that is a key piece. Our CEO has been caught several times saying that this is not an option, this is a must, and we're getting absolute support from the very top.
Can you give a couple of tips as to, if a YMCA doesn't have their C level, that leadership team level bought in, what would you think might help them to galvanize that group? What would be some tips?
Well, you definitely have to look at your measurable data, some things that can really say where we are today, where do we want to be, and why do we want to be there. And for the most part, hopefully, most folks understand the value of having a broader membership base, and retention certainly being easier than recruiting new members and program participants. But when you look at that, if you can identify the difference, if you were to say we'd retain 1%, 2%, 3% more members, how many members is that? How many more lives are we going to be able to connect with and keep that relationship with? And then also, when you can tie those bodies to memberships, you can also look at some financial benefits. All of those sorts of things really kind of play together in helping justify making a movement. And I think a lot of people are really surprised when they look at saying, well, if we could adjust our retention by 2%, what an amazing difference that would mean, both financially and the number of lives you're touching every day.
Absolutely, going back to mission. That's so fantastic, Ken. So let's now go one level down to the director level staff, the executive director level staff, the full-time group. Can you talk a little bit about how did you establish that culture of engagement with that level of folks?
So this was kind of where you and I first connected, when we realized that as a whole we weren't being as engaging as we thought we were. And so we were trying to make some shifts and changes, and we brought in some outside folks to come and talk to our large group. We have a quarterly meeting with all of our full-time staff. It includes everything from program directors to branch execs to our VPs, everywhere in between, including properties managers and so on, that we get together and had some conversations around it. We've committed some time to saying, what is this engagement? Why is it important to us? And really kind of getting that message out to everybody. So before we kind of launched, and even before we had come up with our solid path, got everybody involved in that conversation so that we could prepare ourselves as a group to make a commitment to our direction. And out of that, we came up with our strategy, and we've been kind of pushing it out and launching it.
And when you talk about the strategy, is this part of, like, how does that director level staff model the behavior of engagement that they expect from their direct reports?
So we had kind of identified what we consider to be our engaging conversations, so that we know how does somebody know when they're having a conversation with somebody that this is an engaging conversation that I'm having with this member or program participant. Or what is a conversation I can use to start that engaging conversation? And in terms of modeling, what we did is we set up a standard that all of our member service reps at the front desk and all of our wellness coaches in the wellness center, we're going to record or document at least one of those engaging conversations every day they work. And to model that and support that, all of our full-time staff at all of those membership branches also made a commitment for themselves to enter 3 conversations per day, or record and document 3 of those engaging conversations every day, so that everybody sees that everybody's involved, and it's important for everybody to really jump on the engagement bandwagon.
So let's talk about, kind of, I like to think of it sort of the first time our wonderful relationship began, Ken, and that was when I noticed you had a lot of in-person conversations in the month of December because you ran a contest. And can you talk a little bit about the various incentives that you might use, and also that contest in the month of December? What went well, what maybe didn't go as planned, and how that had an impact on the kinds of in-person conversations and the kinds of engagement you were noticing?
Sure, and actually this was kind of the start, or what kick-started our shift in how we're managing this, because we definitely learned a lot from that. So we had set a contest up for all of our front desk staff, our member service reps, and but basically between Thanksgiving and Christmas, there was a 30-day period of time, invited all of those member service reps to enter as many conversations as they could. And we were having a contest for each branch. The person that entered the most conversations would get a reward, and that was a couple of movie tickets and a gift certificate for dinner. And that the branch overall across the association that entered the most conversations would get a lunch brought in for all of the member service reps at that branch. And on the surface, it was very successful. We were only recording maybe 80 conversations a month. And in that 30-day period of time when we had that contest, we got to about 2,000 conversations documented in that month. And so it looked really great on the surface, but what happened is when we looked back at the data, this is when we started realizing that we weren't really as engaging as we thought we were. And we found that out of all those conversations recorded, about 75% of them came from 3 people in our staff. And so they did a bulk of the work. But what was even more concerning to us was when we looked at those conversations to see what they were, is we weren't really getting quality conversations. They weren't engaging conversations. And that's what kind of triggered our concern and helped us realize that maybe we need to educate our staff a little bit better about what we're talking about. What do we mean by that? And that's right around the time that you and I connected and started sharing some ideas about that.
And so can you talk a little bit about the difference between the conversations that you noticed in December and the conversations that you're noticing now?
Yeah, so those conversations were really, a lot of times we were getting things like I spoke to Bob today and I gave him a towel. And that certainly wasn't the kind of thing we were looking for. They were just kind of padding those numbers, looking for contest wins. But now we've been training our staff to look for 3 engaging conversations. And these may well be plagiarized from another Y, but as you and I talked about them, they really made sense to us, and it gave us a good way to kind of target folks. And the first topic was, what are your goals? What brought you into the Y? What is it about your life you want to change? So what are your goals? How can we help you with those sorts of things? And so when we're recording conversations around that, it helps all of our staff understand our members better. And it helps that member feel that they're connected to us, that we care about their needs. The second conversation was, what are you passionate about? What are your passions? And this can be anything from hobbies to family members to favorite sports teams. It could very well be the why and what they're doing in the wellness center or in the pool, those sorts of things. But the opportunity there is really to just learn more about somebody, and who doesn't feel warm and connected and feel good when they're talking about their favorite thing in the world. And then the fourth one was, what's your why story? And that was really looking at, if you're a brand new member today, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a why story. Maybe as a kid, you went to summer camp for a week and you remember that experience. Or maybe you remember hearing stories about your grandfather swimming at the Y, those sorts of things. But we'll also find out somebody that's been a member for 5 years, that he's connected with some other people within the facility in different ways that you didn't know about. And not to mention folks that have been around even longer than that. And so now we're getting stories documented that are deeper and more meaningful. And to some degree, the staff have really kind of latched onto that because they're going out questing for information. And they're feeling good too because they're connecting with people differently. And it's changed a lot of attitudes about those conversations.
So let's talk about, I know that was such a wonderful, warm, fuzzy, and those 3 topic areas are right on track to with the success principles that you and I have talked about. So now let's get sort of to the Excel sheet. So how do you track these engaging conversations that your staff is having and reporting that to your C-level?
So one of the other things that we've been doing in kind of this training that we're launching, so I've been training folks in the area of, I've been calling it deliberately having engaging conversations. So making a choice to connect with people in a very deliberate way. I apologize for that. And what we're doing is kind of tracking how many conversations we've had. So we've set this standard, and part of having that is kind of doing some accountability. So each week I'm putting out a report that shows across the entire association everybody that's putting in conversations, how many conversations they've put in, and for branches giving kind of a branch total of how many conversations have been recorded at that branch. And along with that report, I'm also including some samples. So I'm kind of going through auditing those conversations and providing at least one conversation per branch that demonstrates a really excellent, engaging conversation on one of those 3 topics. And that report is not just going out to branch execs and membership directors, it's going to every single person in our association that has an email address. So that includes every MSR, wellness coach, program director, properties manager, everybody's getting that.
Can you talk a little bit about what's the feedback that you've received on that report, or have you gotten any?
Yeah, so one of the greatest amount of feedback I've gotten from is actually from people who you wouldn't traditionally think are directly involved in member engagement. We've had a lot of properties manager. I had some folks in our accounting department mention to me, because they're not out in the branches, they're not often directly interacting with members, really pleased at the sample conversations that they're seeing, and making comments like, boy, this is why I miss being in a branch like I used to, those sorts of things. We've also had some really awesome success. One of the cool things about the report is you can see where we're doing a really fantastic job. So I've got one wellness center that's just really, really doing a fantastic job of recording conversations, and they're going well above that expected mark. And that branch is really proud of their success in that area.
That's awesome. I love that you're getting comments from like accountants on some of the conversation samples that you have. So let's dig in a little bit more, because I know you had engaged for a while and then ran the contest and had a spike, and then are now kind of doing a little bit more reporting out. And can you dig a little bit? We kind of discussed this, but really, what did it take if someone is on the call or on the webinar and listening and thinking, I really need to get, I'm a membership director and I really want to create a culture of engagement, and I'm my sphere of influence is my branch. What would you suggest that membership director do to get their other directors maybe looking at having engaging conversations with members and logging them?
So as I've been doing these trainings that we're training all levels. So I'm training our member service reps, our wellness coaches, and any full-time staff in the branch. Some of our most surprising successes have been in properties managers.
Interesting.
They've been setting a really good role model for other people in the centers. So when you have somebody that we've got a facility with a gymnastics center, and a lot of the people that participate in those gymnastics programs may not necessarily be Y members, and so they ask, well, I'm really not directly tied to membership, so why is this important to us? And I can use those property managers as a perfect example. So they're out there, they're always talking to people. Every program participant is a prospective member as well. But we often think of retention as being membership, but there's such a thing as program retention as well. And if you can deliberately engage your program participants in the same way that you're engaging your members, they'll return more likely and participate in that program more. And it's all about getting that everybody we interact with more connected to the why, more involved, and they'll reach out and find other ways if your staff do the same for them. And so we've definitely had some properties managers entering some really great conversations, and we're really pushing that information out to all departments within the association.
Kit, that is such a truth bomb that you just dropped on this webinar. I love, and you're right, we don't talk that much about program retention, but that is a huge aspect, especially when you look at childcare and sports, and if you have a gymnastics program. So that's such a great way to frame this for program directors who might not feel like member retention is necessarily in their wheelhouse. So thank you so much. I think sometimes I also get caught up in the this is member retention, but program retention is just as important for impacting lives.
Well, I'm sure everybody on the call is tracking, recording, and reporting on their membership retention, but we don't always have those reports for our program retentions. We're always focused on that member retention, but program retention is just as important. If you can get somebody to take one more swim class or get them connected, they might take another program in another area, and so on.
And so, Ken, I'm going to do just a slight, this is probably the last question, and then Brooklyn, I'm going to turn it back over to you so folks can start putting questions in. And I'm totally doing a commercial for myself, Ken, but can you talk a little bit about some of the success principles and how some of the data that Daxko has that we brought to Akron has helped move the needle?
Sure. I think we've been definitely watching that retention line a little bit, and there's been some ways to look at our data across multiple years. And so this is relatively new for us. This is what we've been pushing in this engagement initiative. And I think we've really kind of kicked it off right around in March, April sort of thing. So we're only a couple of months in, but we've been able to look at some of our data now compared to the exact same time frame last year and see some pretty good successes. Now, it's a little early to say that this is exactly what's causing it. We're hopeful that this is definitely meaningful. But in terms of that partnership, I think we were really struggling. We had that contest that I described earlier, and it revealed to us that we weren't as engaging as we thought we were. But we were struggling a little bit with where do we go from here? What do we do next? How do we fix this? And we just had a perfectly timed phone call where you and I connected and had some time together to talk about what other folks are doing and really planted some seeds for where can we go next, or what can we do to adjust this situation, and how are we going to know if we're being successful. And so we're definitely watching those conversations very closely, and you've been helping us keep an eye on retention shifts and those sorts of things.
Fantastic. Well, I definitely think that, and we'll say to other folks on the webinar, we have some great success principles that Ken has referred to and is using that we will be pushing out. So please be looking for those things on our blog, and we're just so excited that Ken, you've really taken this and run with it, and thank you and the Akron Y staff team for just being so amazingly receptive to this. And so, Brooklyn, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we can open it up for questions.
Great, thank you. Do want to remind everybody to go ahead and put your questions in the chat function, and we are going to let Ken and Kristin tackle those and try to get as many answers to you as possible. We have already had several questions come through, and many of them are similar, so I think we can kind of consolidate these by answering. Can you explain or reiterate, maybe even clarify what you mean by recording a conversation? Maybe just briefly touch on the technology you're using to maybe help automate that process a little bit, or the actual process is implemented around reporting. Just to kind of talk about how this has helped you put your processes in place and streamline the technology.
Sure. So, yeah, so we're using Daxko Engage. And we've been using it. We launched in 2015, I think it was April, might have been May. And that tool allows us to record those in-person conversations. And what our experience is, there was some initial pushback on, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. But when people actually get to the recording, you maybe spend a minute, maybe 2 minutes tops recording a conversation. You certainly spend more time in the engaging conversation itself than actually recording those. And so that's what we're talking about, is we're recording those conversations in Daxko Engage. And we are at all of our front desks and at our desks in our wellness center. Daxko Engage is expected to be up on the screen at all times, unless they're directly interacting with a member on a different subject. So at the member service area, for example, if they're doing a program registration, it's okay to switch over to Daxko operations. But in the interim, they've got Daxko Engage up, so that's very easy to select people and enter those conversations.
And Ken, do you want to talk, Brooklyn, was there a question about what Ken used to track?
Yes, yes.
So, right, Engage also gives us some of that information. I'm able to basically look at, and I had mentioned I'm kicking out reports based on a weekly summary. So I'll look at an individual branch for an entire week and get that information based on that individual branch. I'm also, I didn't mention before, I'm doing a monthly summary. So at the end of the month, showing the total successes for that month as well. But I'm also pulling that information out of Engage.
And I will just echo, Brooklyn, in my travels when I talk to people about tracking, they do almost exactly what Ken does, which is look at weekly and then also roll it up for the month. So that's relatively common out in the Y world. And
Great. One of the other questions we have gotten a lot of is what all staff members are using and recording these conversations. Is it just the wellness and front desk staff? Does it go beyond that?
Yeah, so our expectation is that every full-time staff at a membership branch enter 3 conversations per week, or 3 conversations per day they work. They were struggling a little bit getting to that 3, but we're definitely meeting the 1 goal that we have set for the MSRs and the wellness coaches. So all of our full-time staff are at least doing 1 a day as well. So yeah, I mentioned before, like our properties manager, our facility guys, our aquatics directors, our child watch coordinators, everybody's got an account, and the expectation is that they would be entering conversations as well. And some of the coolest conversations that we've gotten have been away from the front desk, away from the member service area. Because in a lot of times those folks, everybody else other than the member service area, tends to have a little more time that they can interact with a member. Whereas at the desk, there's always somebody else coming in the door that can bump that conversation out.
Great. And one of the questions that came through is how do you keep your staff accountable to those goals?
Yeah, so this has been very, very new to us doing this and reporting on this. I've been kicking this report out for about 6 weeks now. And one of the goals is we're sending it, as I mentioned, to everybody. So even the front desk staff, the member service reps, and the wellness coaches, they're getting these reports every week, and then that monthly summary that we're coming up on in my next monthly summary here soon. So everybody's seeing that. So there's a little bit of kind of knowing what your neighbor's up to and how many conversations are going in. But there's also, we've got a few folks that haven't really jumped on board yet. And we're definitely at that phase where we need to start including that in some performance evaluations and that sort of thing. We've not quite hit that mark, but we're definitely on the verge. And that's basically not meeting an expectation of the job. So that'll definitely be part of performance reviews and that sort of thing.
And speaking of that, one of the questions we got is around keeping your staff engaged. Do you have any tips beyond staff working to keep membership engaged about keeping your staff engaged with the process?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. As I mentioned, that email I think is a great recognition. We also include, when I include those sample conversations, I identify the staff person that recorded that conversation. So there's a little bit of recognition in demonstrating who's doing a fantastic job of catching these conversations, in addition to demonstrating good ones. In the monthly summary, in the last one, I also adopted a behavior of identifying the most engaging staff person of the month and the most engaging branch of the month, and highlighting them in that monthly summary. We're going to be talking about some kind of additional reward that would go along with that. Back to the idea of some movie tickets and a dinner gift card, something like that, to really kind of add a little something extra to it. We want to be cautious that we're not getting people that are just entering junk to try and compete. And so there's some subjective information there. It's not based on just the number of conversations entered. We actually are auditing those conversations and identifying what a good conversation, whether those conversations are good or not. But we've definitely had some follow-up with some folks that are entering poor conversations or conversations that aren't related to our engaging topics at all, to give them some feedback and kind of do some correction on their direction.
Brooklyn, this is Kristin. I just want to add in that to kind of follow up with what Ken is saying, there are other organizations that are doing that kind of monthly reporting, but also in a staff meeting, recognizing staff who are having engaging conversations. Some call them team huddles, so either at the week or before someone starts a shift, this director level person might gather the group together and again recognize that they've hit their goal, recognize a great conversation, and then what Ken was saying is kind of also recognizing who they might need to be coaching a little bit to help either encourage or to adjust the kinds of conversations that people are logging. So I think recognition is a big piece of that, whether that is in person during a staff meeting or doing what Ken is doing, sending out reports, and both.
One of the other things that I have done as well is we have a way to, through Engage, to look at conversations that have been entered today across the entire association. And so periodically I'll go down through that and identify one that's happened within the last couple of hours that looks really fantastic. And I'll shoot an email off to that individual, kind of rewarding them and thanking them and acknowledging, hey, I saw you into this conversation. It was absolutely fantastic. And then I include their direct supervisor and their branch exec, who usually then follow up with that person as well, to just give them a little additional one-on-one recognition and try to do it timely so that it's, like I said, I try and look at something within the last hour or two. So in a lot of cases, I'll catch them while they're still there at the front desk.
Great. And I do want to ask you, or just clarify, there have been some questions about recording conversations. When we say recording, we do mean typing in the conversation into the technology, not necessarily voice recording. But are there any tools that you use to make that more mobile or helpful on the floor, so that it's an easier process for your team members?
Sure. The tool we're using, of course, is Daxko Engage, and right now we're mostly using that on desktop PCs, though it can certainly work with tablets and other mobile devices such as a cell phone. Right now, for us, the way all of our centers are set up, there are, for example, our wellness center, there's a computer out on the floor. You don't have to go into a back office to enter those conversations. And most of our staff feel that the actual entering of that conversation makes sense for them to do after the conversation, to step away and go and record and document that conversation, rather than to kind of stand out in the wellness center and kind of tap away that response. Now, that being said, I do have a couple of staff at one of our downtown branches that use their own mobile phones. It's just a web-based tool to connect to Engage, but I think they're using it mostly to identify people out on the floor so they know who people are. And can maybe learn a little bit about them before going and having a conversation with them.
Brooklyn, this is Kristin. I don't know why I keep introducing myself. I'm the only other person who's going to talk, so I'm sorry for keeping doing that. Anyway, hi you guys, what's up? Some YMCAs and organizations will have staff actually use a notebook, which maybe does seem a little antiquated, but if they can't get to a computer, they're away from it, or they don't want to do it right at that moment, they will have a notebook open. And some Ys, in order to help transition the staff who might be a little gun shy to immediately log a conversation on the computer, will give them a booklet so that they can write the conversation or write something quick that summarizes it, so then they can go in later and log that conversation. So some do use kind of the old school pen and paper for that. I would imagine if a YMCA didn't have Engage, that's a way they could potentially log conversations, would be utilizing some kind of notebook, or if they want to do something in an Excel sheet or maybe some kind of email thread. I've heard of all of those things if a Y doesn't currently have Engage. And actually I spoke with a Y that just got Engaged that used to do this new member process utilizing Excel until they got the software tool. So if you don't have Engage, there's still ways I think that you can encourage your staff to have and to note these really wonderful, engaging conversations.
One of the other things that we've come across, and I'm sure a lot of folks out there have a staff person that they think, wow, I'll never get that person to go type that conversation in. That person's not a computer person. They're really not comfortable. They're never going to remember their password. And they type slow, and they're just going to get frustrated, and they're not going to do it. And so that was definitely a concern. We've got a couple of folks out there, and you don't want to say, wow, they're not doing their job, because this is a skill set that we never expected them to have before, and now they still don't have it. So one of the things that we've talked to, especially on the wellness floor, we've said, hey, you know what, on the way out, pick one of the conversations you've had today, stop at the front desk and tell that person a story and have them enter that conversation for you so that we can still catch it and not let it get away. And so there's some of that, you know, it ties back to allowing us to be accountable and prove we're doing it and demonstrate that we're really doing what we're saying we're doing. And then later those conversations are available to other people that want to connect with those members and program participants to know a little bit about them.
Great. One question that we've gotten, and it kind of even teases up for some other webinars that we're planning for future series. What are you doing as you have been able to capture these conversations to better target the members based on what you're learning? Are you implementing any campaigns or programs around the conversations based on what you're capturing?
That's a fantastic question. We're kind of very early into this, and that has come up. This is a question that we're definitely getting ready to start exploring. The way we're currently entering those conversations, it's a little challenging for us to kind of pull those out in bulk and aggregate some kind of campaign for those folks. But it's definitely something that's going to be on the horizon for us.
I want to jump in and mention the Cincinnati YMCA and Florida's First Coast uses an email initiative that they send out targeted communications with, not just emails, but I believe Florida's First Coast does phone calls, where in Daxko operations, there's an interest section, and you can add up to a certain number of interests. So when someone is a new member or goes on a tour, they can actually check what they might be interested in, and then in Engage, you can run an email or phone call initiative based on what they put in their interest level in Daxko operations. So, you know, while we can't pull anything right now from the comments, there is a way to connect that to the member's profile and operations and then run an initiative through Daxko Engage.
Perfect. Well, that does conclude the questions we received. Kristin, Ken, any final thoughts that you'd like to add before closing?
I just want to definitely thank Ken and again the Akron staff and the CEO there who have just been so amazing in ramping up their culture of engagement, and Ken especially for doing those weekly reports and copying me on various communications and always helping us to try and do our best to improve the software piece of Daxko Engage and being so active on the communities board. So Ken, thank you so much for being such a wonderful person who's really been at the forefront of this as I've started in this position.
No, I definitely appreciate the time, and you've definitely given us a hand. From my perspective, you know, it's one of those fun things as being the technology director to be kind of involved in doing this engagement initiative. But it's one of the fun parts about working for a YMCA is that you know, you're not always doing what your job description says you do.
Well, thank you both. I hope that everybody was able to take away some key nuggets today that will help impact how they are working to engage staff and encouraging their staff to engage members, and going beyond that to engage more participation in programs. This is our second part in the series. We plan to do at least 2 more each quarter, and we just really appreciate your participation and attendance today, and we will be also sending out a recording to everyone that registered by the end of the week. So thank you, Ken. Thank you, Kristin, for your expertise and sharing your best practices, and we really appreciate all that were able to attend today.